We told you early this week, and I didn't hear very many other people out there saying it. But when a lot of people were saying, oh, Obama's going to be arrested, oh, he's going to be perp walked, we've got the 2016 intelligence briefings that prove Obama committed a crime. I told you, look, the Supreme Court ruling that said Trump had the power as president to act as he did in 2020 and could not be charged criminally as a result, those expansive presidential powers, the Supreme Court held 6-3 in Trump's favor. We told you that that ruling was likely to come. It now has come. And guess what? It applies to Bill Clinton. It applies to Barack Obama. It applies to George W. Bush. It applies to Donald Trump, any living president, any current president, any future president. And Trump was actually asked about that, given the revelations from Tulsi Gabbard. He said, hey, look, Obama owes me big because he's probably protected by the same ruling. Let me play that cut. Trump just said this a little bit ago. Listen.
How do you think that the Supreme Court's ruling that benefited you on presidential immunity would apply to former President Barack Obama and what you're accusing him of doing?
It probably helps him a lot. Probably helps him a lot, the immunity ruling. But it doesn't help the people around him at all. But it probably helps him a lot. He's done criminal acts, there's no question about it. But he has immunity, and it probably helps him a lot. He owes me big. Obama owes me big.
Obama owes me big. That is Trump talking about the situation there where Obama is now protected, likely, by the larger ruling that the Supreme Court made on presidential privilege. And we told you back when this ruling came down, you may not like it at some point in the future. It reminds me of Mitch McConnell when they changed the filibuster rules for the Supreme Court, saying, hey, you may not like the results and it may happen sooner than you think. There you go. The benefit sometimes of precedent set by the Supreme Court, you think, oh, this is great. And then there's another situation that comes down the road and the precedent is applied evenly, whether Democrat or Republican or frankly independent or Whig or Tory or whatever future parties may exist in the years, decades, hundreds of years into the future in the United States. The Supreme Court ruling will apply to every president when it comes to the president having the powers to exercise the prerogative of the presidency without worrying about being charged with criminal related incidents going forward. And so I would say in general, this week, if you look at the entirety of the week, has largely been characterized by revelations relating to the 2016 intelligence community's attempt to create the Russiagate fervor and ongoing discussion surrounding the Epstein files and what has been uncovered there. This morning, as part of my prep, as I always do, I read the New York Times. There is a huge multi-thousand-word piece in the New York Times that goes into the review of all of the Epstein files by the Department of Justice under Trump and the fact that, frankly, they haven't been able to find anything and about how frustrated that made Pam Bondi and Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, who desperately wanted to find people that they could charge based on the information that was inside of those files. And according to that New York Times report, there just isn't anything there. Doesn't mean that there might not have been in the past. 90% of people out there believe that these files should be released. Again, there are challenges because some of these people are victims. But I suspect that they're going to try to release everything that they can, and there's just not going to be much there. Ghislaine Maxwell, interviewed yesterday by the deputy AG to see if she knew anything else. One thing that I think I have not done a good job talking with you guys about from the Epstein perspective is remember that there were hundreds of millions of dollars paid out to the alleged Epstein victims by his estate, by all these other different large investment banks that also had interactions and dealings with Jeffrey Epstein. In other words, people say, well, what happened to all the victims? Well, a lot of those victims came forward, raised their hand, remained anonymous, but said, hey, we are a part of this class action lawsuit alleging that we were mistreated by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And many of those women, they got paid hundreds of millions of dollars by Epstein's estate. It doesn't get talked about very much, but there were hundreds of millions of dollars paid out to those victims of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And I do think that that has kind of slid under the radar and it hasn't gotten that much attention. But people said, well, what happened to all these victims? A lot of them came forward and said, hey, this was what was done to me. And we are filing a class action lawsuit civilly seeking damages from Jeffrey Epstein's estate in the wake of his death. And the estate team in New York, maybe you can look out and see if there's a full dollar value. But I know they paid out hundreds of millions of dollars in claims against individuals who purport that they were mistreated. So again, two different scandals to me. And I asked this question. I asked you guys earlier this week, hey, which do you think is the bigger story, Epstein or the Epstein fallout or Russiagate? And overwhelmingly, you guys said Russiagate. And also, I gave a third option in that poll. And the third option was, I don't care about any of this. Just get my costs down. In other words, I'm just focused on the economy. And it actually outrated the Epstein drama as well. In other words, the majority of you said Russiagate's a really, really big story. That was the winner of the poll. Second place was, I don't care about any of this. Just get my costs down. And then third was Epstein. But I would say we basically have dueling controversies, for lack of a better way to describe it, with the Russiagate, which I believe is actually a huge story, the Russiagate hoax, and then also the fallout of Epstein, all taking place simultaneously. And of course, Democrats are saying, well, this is just Trump's desire to distract from the Epstein-related cases. But I actually don't think that's true. I think that what happened with Russia has been an obsession of Trump's for a long time. And in particular, I wanted to play some of this because these are flashbacks. And I know some of you remember it, but remember what happened the first time Trump met with Putin and what the reaction was as the media had bought into the idea that Trump was a Manchurian candidate. I want to play a couple of these cuts. Here's cut 7. Chris Cuomo, back when he was still on CNN, screaming about President Trump and the Russia hoax to his audience. This was in 2018. Some of you will remember it. This is what Trump 1.0 was dealing with. All lies. Cut 7.
The world witnessed a betrayal the likes of which we've never seen. America's president sided with its enemy today. Shock has turned to a national shunning as America finds unity in President Trump's perfidy. It was the simplest of all questions regarding Russia's attacks on our democracy. Did it happen?
So I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
That was the President of the United States' answer. A kick in the groin to his counterintelligence men and women, to his country, and most to the truth. With the world watching, the leader of the free world sided with the man who directly ordered a sophisticated attack on America's electoral system. End of discussion. That's what happened. Russia did it.
All that's false. And remember, CNN cut away from Tulsi Gabbard when she was laying out the fact that the intelligence agencies manufactured this great Russia hoax as a way to delegitimize the Trump presidency. They're still not allowing their audience to understand what actually happened. And again, this is another flashback. I think it's important to remember the unbelievable histrionics that were at play here. Cut 8, former Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta said it was the most tragic day in the history of the presidency when Trump said, hey, I'm not really convinced that Russia was rigging our election. Cut 8.
This is probably the most tragic day in the history of the presidency.
So what do we do now? I mean, what is the rule book for when a president betrays his own country and sides with an enemy?
And so I think it's up to the American people to make clear that we will not tolerate a president who does not defend the United States of America. Probably the worst cyber attack against the United States to undermine our election system. These are bad people. They're bad guys. They're the enemy. They're the adversary.
Okay, the most tragic day in the history of the presidency. Leon Panetta, remember a thing called Ford's Theater? John Wilkes Booth shooting Abraham Lincoln in the back of the head. Feels like a pretty tragic day for the presidency. FDR dies in office in the middle of World War II, near the end of World War II. Feels like a pretty tragic day in the history of the presidency. How about when the British burned down the White House? Feels like kind of a tragic day in the history of the presidency. The degree of lying that was built around this Russian disinformation campaign, Russia could have never dreamed of having America's own institutions turn on America to the degree that it did to try to tear down Donald Trump. And so I don't blame Trump, who spent 4 years basically screaming into the wind, there's nothing to this. I won, and they just can't figure out how Hillary lost. And now, to her credit, Tulsi Gabbard lays out in a calculated fashion exactly what went on inside of the intelligence agencies and demonstrates that this Russia hoax happened. Now, a lot of you out there are throwing up your hands and saying, what's going to happen? That's the challenge. And I think, to his credit, Trump even acknowledged basically nothing can happen to Obama. I think it's almost impossible to charge him with anything. And I think it's also very hard to charge others because the time has passed to such an extent. Now, I do think leaks of these intelligence documents that the Washington Post and the New York Times, among others, used as their method to win Pulitzer Prizes and seed this idea that this untruth was in fact a truth. I do think there should be consequences there. And at an absolute minimum, I think this is very significant because it's correcting the historic record and making people slowly aware of exactly what went on. I will take your calls. You guys can react to all of this. We've got a ton as we roll through the program. No guests scheduled right now. 282-2882. That's 800-282-2882. We can also have some fun. If you've got talkbacks and you want to weigh in on anything that happened all week long, we will play some of those as well. In the meantime, uncertainty almost always causes a reaction, particularly in our markets. And right now there's uncertainty about the value of the dollar, about how much inflation there is going to be. And in times of uncertainty, people sometimes race to hard physical assets like gold. It's been true throughout all the millennium, throughout all the annals of finance. People like the tangible value of gold. Birch Gold can make owning physical gold very easy. They easily convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA with physical gold. They can help you buy gold to store in your name as well, to store in your home safe. You can have it physically in your house. Text my name, Clay, to 989898, and Birch Gold will send you a free info kit on gold to find out why it would make sense potentially in your portfolio. For thousands of years, people have been holding gold. It may well make sense as it continues to set record highs in your portfolio as well. Why not do the research and find out? With an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, tens of thousands of happy customers. Take control of your savings today. Text the name Clay to 989898 to get started. That's Clay to 989898 to get started today.